I think from chapter 1 into the first part of chapter 2, we have established that sin is a reality, and God hates sin, and God made it possible for us to be freed from the penalty of our sin through Jesus, but we don't want to sin. We're trying hard not to sin. We want to live right. But if anybody gets to the point they think that they have it made and they think they're above sin, then they're not. I mean, he addresses both angles. So it was kind of a tongue twister as we went through chapter 1. And we entered chapter 2, and he said that, but you need to understand, if someone does sin, dear children, if someone does sin, there is an atoning sacrifice, and that is Jesus. Now we go into verse 3, and it's easy to understand in a sense, but I've always found this passage to be difficult for me to really put into right thoughts. We know that we have come to know Him. That's Jesus. We know we've come to know Him if we obey His commands. Now, we use that phraseology a lot, that we obey His commands. But when I ask you, what are His commands, how do you answer that? What are the commands of Jesus? All right, there's one of them is love. But see, we have difficulty. In the Old Testament, if you would ask on a certain area, what are the commands, there would be certain scholars or priests, and probably everybody else would know, well, you do this, and this. And on the Sabbath, you don't do this, and you do this on this day. And they got all these commands. And we're told if we know Him, we will obey Him. And yet, the commands are not just 1, 2, 3, 9, and 10. So that's why we go back often, as we should, to Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7, where I sometimes say that is a thesis statement of Jesus, or I have been known to say, and I probably get thumbs down from Burke's deal if he posts this, it's the constitution of the kingdom. It's how we operate. Because there, Jesus becomes very specific about what He wants life to look like in His kingdom. So does He talk about our speech in His kingdom? You've heard it been said of old, you shall not kill, but I'm going to tell you, if you even what? Talk badly about someone, it's wrong. And He's going to say, there's an old commandment that says don't commit adultery, but I'm going to tell you, I don't want you to even get into the lust world. And He just keeps going with that kind of thing. And so you find all these lifestyle principles that I think Jesus lays out for us to try to live. And we don't get them lived perfectly. We just keep trying to live that lifestyle. Now, we know that we've come to know Him if we're obedient to that. If we keep trying to live, as I keep calling, kingdom people. We keep trying to live like kingdom people are supposed to live. You can also go to what Paul says about the fruits of the Spirit. They are love, and they are, anybody got another one? Joy, peace, and patience, and gentleness, and kindness, and faithfulness, and self-control. And those all seem to be the way we're supposed to live in the kingdom. We try to live by the Spirit in the kingdom. And so, if we are trying to live as kingdom people, once we become members of the kingdom, two things he's already said now will happen. One is we know the blood of Jesus keeps on what? Cleansing us. And now we know that we know him. We really truly know him if we're trying to keep those commandments. The man who says, I know him, but does not keep the commandments is a what? And how many times has he said that so far? In chapter 1, he said the same thing. If you say you know Jesus, I ask you, do you know Jesus? Yes, I know Jesus. Well, sometimes I think people say, I've heard the name Jesus, or I remember hearing about Jesus. But if you claim to know him, and yet you do not keep these commandments, you're not telling the truth. You're not representing yourself correctly. Now, hold on to that phrase for a second. You're not representing yourself correctly. If I said the word con artist, what comes to your mind? I didn't say who, I said what. What does that look like to be a con artist?
This deception. Something you're not.
Okay. All right. It's a misperception. It's something you're not. Remember, I've told you in all of our travels and so forth, Suze will read to me as I'm driving. Now, I know you can get books through my phone and all that kind of stuff, but we still read, and we got away from it, but going to Fort Worth this last weekend, we started this book. It's a really, really good book. It's a faith-based novel, and but I can't explain the whole book, but it starts off with someone who is a con artist, and he represents himself one way until he finally gets to where he wants to be. And then the family to whom he represented himself like this finds out he's totally 100% opposite. That's almost like what it sounds like right here. If you claim that you know him, if you're representing yourself as if you know him, but you're not doing what he says, you're really a liar. And a con artist is trying to get you to buy something, trying to make you believe something, trying to mislead you on something. And the con artist is a what? Always a liar. Always a liar. And so that's how he starts this. If you claim to know him, then you obey what he says. And I wish I could just tell you it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and eight things, but it's not. It's a lifestyle. It's obedience to a lifestyle to which you are born into. You're born into this family. You're born into this kingdom, and you're born into a lifestyle. Now, here's where we get in a little bit of trouble. Because you have to understand, it's really hard to judge somebody else in their walk with Jesus, because we are at different levels of spiritual maturity as we walk on that lifestyle. And that gets us in trouble because, listen to this very carefully, we don't do different very well. Everybody got that? We don't do different very well. If you're like me, and you dress like me, and you act like me, we get along pretty well. But if you're really, really different, we don't do different as well. Everybody kind of got that? So a guy walks up to me Sunday after I'd spoken. His hair is different. His tattoos are different. His rings are different. And I'm thinking, okay, what am I into right here? And he said, I used to listen to you preach at Sunset. And I went to school here. And I teach this Bible class. And I mean, he went right, and I'm thinking, oh, wow, Ken, you just made this really keen judgment about this person who looked a lot different. And he may be ahead of me on a bunch of stuff. Am I making sense to you? You got to be careful. You got to be really, really careful. Because we do things differently. So, everybody got that? But if anyone obeys his word, God's love is truly made complete in him. What that means is that God is truly healing you. God is truly saving you. God's showing his love through Jesus to you. If you're really obeying him, if you're really walking as Jesus walks, then you're seeing the reality of God's love. And God's love was shown to us by one primary thing. What was that? Christ, the gift of Jesus. Now, his love is also shown in other ways. He takes care of us. He answers prayers. He does all kinds of things. But the primary thing is some things may not work out in this life. You may beg God for something to work out. Some things may not work out in this life. Lots of times things don't work out like we want them to. But there's one thing that's already been worked out and will never be taken back, and that's that Jesus was given for us. So God's love is made complete in us if we're really obeying what he says, for living like kingdom people. And this is how we know we are in him. This is how we know. We walk as what? What does it say?
Christ-like.
We walk Christ-like. We walk as Jesus did. Now, what are the commandments? I'm back to the start. What are the commandments? Well, love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself and live a moral life and we walk as Jesus did. That's what he's describing in Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. The way he's going to live his life and the way he wants kingdom people to live their life. Everybody kind of see what I'm talking about? We walk like Jesus walked. That's the real statement you need to underline right here. That's the real catch to all this. Now, we'll get into the very first part of this next and then we'll stop. But because it's interesting to me, as I make all this argument that we walk like Jesus walked, he explains to us that walk he wants us to walk in that sermon that he called Sermon on the Mount. And then he reemphasizes that the way he deals with people. And then the writers of the New Testament like Paul and Peter and others and now John are, it seems to me, explaining what Jesus was saying way back in the Sermon on the Mount. And he comes along and he gets back to this passage we dealt with on Sunday morning not too long ago. Dear friends, I'm not writing you a new command, but an old one. You've had it really since the beginning. The old command is the message you have heard. Yet, I am writing you a new command. And its truth is seen in him, in Jesus, and in you. Okay? And this is the way John's writing. It's kind of a tongue twister. It's kind of a mind twister. Everybody kind of understand what I mean by that? It takes a moment to wrap your mind around it. I was in a meeting earlier this week for 2 hours, and they kept bringing this date out and everything, and I kept looking at it and kept saying, I said, look, I can't even make sense of any of this. Here's what I want: this, and this. And bring it back to me today at 1 o'clock. Well, today it came back at 1 o'clock, this, and this. It kind of made sense to me. You know, I kind of could see it now. God wanted people to love each other starting when? In the beginning. This is God. This is what God wanted. So I'm not telling you something new, and yet it is new because it's seen differently right now than it's ever been seen before on this earth. How is it seen differently than it's ever been seen before on this earth? How is God's love seen differently today than it's ever been seen before on this earth? Before Jesus on this earth, I should say.
It's in the believers now.
Okay. It's seen in Jesus and in us. If we're walking like Jesus walked, it's seen in Him. You can read about Him, and then it's seen in those of us who are trying our best to duplicate that walk. Though we don't do it perfectly, we keep trying to duplicate that walk. And it's harder and harder to do. But I'm telling you, people are getting hungrier and hungry for it. They had a chapel Monday morning. And at chapel Monday morning, it was what they call a praise chapel. It had a song leader that lead singing at one of the congregations in Tulsa. He came over, he led singing. And he did it in a wonderful way. And when he stopped and the chapel's over, the students wouldn't leave, and the students kept singing. Now that's really rare because normally the students what? They're trying to duck out of there really fast and really quickly. They kept singing. They kept standing there. They really like this. There are people who are, I think, deep down right now, searching for something different. They're sick of the political world. They're sick of the world that's trying to convince you to believe this or that. They're sick of a world where they're trying to take little children and indoctrinate them in certain ways of thinking. They're getting sick of a lot of things, and they're looking for something. And what they need to see is Christ through us. And they're drawn to it right now. There's a hunger welling up inside of our country and our world. There's truly a hunger. There's a famous author who died recently. Ironically, he was a preacher in New York City. And his name was Keller. But he said something like this: I think America is ripe for a major revival. I think the world is ripe for a major revival. But we are going to have to be different. We are going to have to be different. And I think what he meant by that was, we're going to have to be Christ walking around. They got to see Jesus living inside of us.